Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cranbrook Art Museum for those of you joining us here in the DeSalle Auditorium, and a hello to everyone joining us out there in cyberspace. I'm Kat Goffnett, the Assistant Curator of Collections here at Cranbrook Art Museum, as well as the curator of the Homebody exhibition that's prompted this evening's discussion. Homebody developed over the course of the pandemic as a way to explore, as social scientist Evieres Tucker describes, the gap between the natural home and the particular ideal home where one would be fulfilled. My interest in this gap really started through research done in grad school, which focused on photographic theory. So perhaps it's not surprising that this evening's discussion, titled Imaging Home, circles back to this interest in world building through lens-based media, from the archival to the composed. Living in this space of unknowing, with the concept of home in my mind, the word itself opened up beyond the domestic architectural space to concepts of belonging on a national scale, as well as resonating on a more intimate bodily scale. Each definition posed more questions and lines of inquiry. How do we shape our physical spaces to achieve the goal of home? What makes a place feel like home, whether it be an apartment or a country? How do we make ourselves and our bodies into something that we feel both at home, in, and with? When I was thinking of home and coming up with these questions, I was simultaneously looking for answers in art, as I do. I didn't want to find the answer with a capital A, or even one answer that's non-existent. Rather, I immersed myself in the perspective of others, investigating the same things, unpacking the same tropes, grappling for the same fulfillment through this enigmatic term. As things developed, centering the exhibition around Detroit-based artists became essential, not only as a means for me as a transplant to the area to connect with local artists, but as a way to further unpack and embrace belonging in this new space. I began reaching out to artists such as Tyanna Buie, whose enigmatic work, utilizing family photos and domestic ephemera, was introduced to me via an exhibition at MoCAD that I attended early in my grad school days. Buie is a Chicago, Illinois, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin native who received her BA from Western Illinois University and her MFA from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Buie has attended artist in residency programs across the country, such as the Joan Mitchell Center in New Orleans, and also maintains a connection to the community by hosting printmaking workshops and demonstrations and creating public art. Buie has served as a visiting lecturer across the country, in addition to her role as assistant professor and section chair of printmaking at CCS in Detroit. Buie has both exhibited and is featured in collections across the nation and has won numerous awards, including a 2019 Kresge Fellowship in the Visual Arts. I was introduced to the work of Lorena Cruz Santiago through Cranbrook, both the thesis room and through friendly coworkers. Cruz Santiago's work drew me in not only through its familial connection, as she documents her parents' gardens and their homegrown foods, but via her inclusion of a broader perspective, quote, illustrating post-colonial themes of migration and assimilation through her multidisciplinary practice. Cruz Santiago is a Mexican-American artist from Northern California, currently based in Detroit, Michigan. She received her BFA in photography from Sonoma University and her MFA in photography from Cranbrook Academy of Art in 2019. She's exhibited work from her multidisciplinary practice across the country and attended residencies, including one in Oaxaca City, Mexico, and Darkroom Detroit, here in Michigan. My connection to Renee Willoughby dates back to our time together at Alma College, and through divine happenstance, we have found ourselves together in the same area again. After many fruitful, if meandering, conversations about life, love, and quarantine, as well as her interdisciplinary practice working within the themes of collage, ghosts, and telekinetics, Willoughby created the work on view in the exhibition. She creates both individually and collaboratively in Detroit, working often with the Hinterlands, a host of people, Carrie Morris Arts Production, and Interstate Arts. She recently did a year-long community project for Kohler Arts Center with the performance group The Hinterlands, and had her video art featured in Third Man's public access web series. Darryl DeAngelo Terrell's work came to find me through very millennial means, Instagram. They had participated in a unique interview format for Red Bull Arts, answering questions about their work via text message that were then posted to social media. I was immediately hooked by both their images and the dialogue that unfolded. when Homebody grew to encompass feelings of home and belonging more broadly, Terrell's work, which explores issues of identity, including sexuality and gender, the displacement of Black and brown people, femme identity and strength, the Black family structure, safe spaces for all Black bodies, and personal stories, their work resonated at the perfect pitch. In addition to their lens-based performative practice, Terrell is a multi-hyphenate of many means, including a writer, curator, DJ, organizer, and educator. Terrell received their MFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. They have performed and exhibited work broadly both in the US and beyond, and have been a resident in many programs, including most recently in 2021, Black Rock Senegal residency. Terrell was also a 2019 Kresge Arts in Detroit Fellow of Visual Arts. Finally, our fantastic moderator for this evening's event, Imani Mixon, also entered my life during the pandemic. Seeking ways to connect and fill the hole left behind by the ending of grad school, I found myself in a virtual book club led by none other than Mixon. She guided us through a book of essays, deftly creating a safe space to discuss an array of often tricky subjects through her keen questioning of the text at hand. The following summer, once again, I was treated to her inquisitive mind through a more decidedly art-centered lens via her hosting of the podcast, Subject Matters, made in collaboration with Kresge Arts in Detroit and Red Bull. Mixon was born and raised in Detroit and is a self-described long-form storyteller who is, quote, inspired by everyday griots who bear witness to their surroundings and report it back out. Equal parts urgent and essential, her multimedia work centers the experiences of Black women and independent artists. Mixon's writing has also been featured in numerous publications, including Billboard, Curb Detroit, Huffington Post, and Vogue, among many, many others. And with that, I ask you to please help me welcome Imani Mixon, Tyanna Buie, Lorena Cruz Santiago, Renee Willoughby, and Darryl DeAngelo Terrell.
Thank you all so much for being here. It's great to see faces instead of just like popping up on the screen. And I do just want to invite all the artists to talk like we're in my living room because I don't want this to feel like a lecture. So I definitely have specific questions for each of you, but feel free to answer anything that resonates with you all. And I'm really excited to be here because once I saw the Homebody exhibit, I'm just like, first of all, it's a pandemic. Second of all, y'all are still making art. And all of it was very, very real and raw and vulnerable in a way that I don't think a lot of people have been able to think right now. So I know that it is interesting to create things that are so tender and then sit up and talk about them. So thank you for agreeing to be here. I'm so excited. And the first question I do have in response to Catherine's intro is that I know that as Catherine was curating this event, she sent you all a very simple prompt about home as an extension of yourself, and I do think that's true. And having seen each of your work in the exhibit, I'm curious about what extensions of yourself do you feel like you showed us in your work that is displayed at the exhibit right now?
I'm gonna talk very loudly until the mic comes on. I'm just gonna hold it as if it's working. Yeah, it's on. It's just, I don't know. Well, for me, well, for one, it's my entire naked ass body and a diptych, right? So that's an extension of my body, which for me is taking 30 years to think of my body as home. So that's what it was for me. Oh, there we go. I'll reiterate that for YouTube. So as I was stating, the images that I have in the show are of my entire naked body, right? And for so long, my body never felt like home. But at 30, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to take nude photos of my body. So yeah, that was like the extension of home for me when I was thinking about making the work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can go. I think a couple things. Well, in my piece it's the one with the plants, lots of plants, and an image of my mother who I refaced as myself. And I think of home as where your mother is. And I've noticed that, and I grew up in foster care, so home is always been a tricky subject for me because I didn't grow up in a nuclear family structure. And I'm still debating what home is. And I like to choose wherever I like. I'm like, well, both of those places are my home. Like, you can't do that. I'm like, who said I can't? So I claim Milwaukee and Chicago because I grew up in Chicago, but also bounced back and forth between Wisconsin and Illinois my whole life. But I think plants are very, I don't know, some people probably picked up more plants since the pandemic. I had mine before the pandemic, so for me, those are my babies. But also, people, I feel like when they settle down, they get plants. You either get really good furniture or you get plants. So which one's cheaper, right? And then some people like to test their motherhood, right? Can I nurture this thing and can I keep it alive? And I put that on my dating profile. I can keep plants alive. So that's a trick. That's a skill. I brought orchids back twice. So, and I think literally my mother represents home, but also the things in my home and curating a space for myself.
Got it.
Can you hear me through my mask?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think so. I have 3 works in the show, and they're actually all over the course of like 4 or 5. I think the oldest one is from 2016, and so that one is very directly related to home. Like, it's figuratively showing my father and like their process of immigration. And I think throughout the years, like, I'm kind of shifting the way that I represent home because I want to be a little bit more careful about like the production of images and how I'm including my parents. And so you'll kind of see that like the work is not so figurative anymore and is actually more of a collaborative work with my parents rather than it being them becoming the subjects of the work. I want them to actually be part of it. So that's kind of the extension that I'm, I think, including in the work.
Yeah, that's major.
Work?
Yes.
Oh, yes, hello. Well, I loved hearing everyone's answers so much. And also the houseplants. I started doing houseplants as well. Well, just sprouts. I just planted these seeds, and they were just these derpy little sprouts that come up, and I'd water them every day. And I'm like, oh, look at it, I'm growing something. Something's happening. I'm just in my apartment all the time, but this is happening. Anyway, it's very entertaining. And in response to this question about home, that's something I struggle with kind of incessantly. And I was thinking about it so much today, too, because of this talk, that home just feels like such a nebulous thing, not a static place. It's like a thing I'm constantly trying to carve and find and like undulate with. And home within myself, which I also resonate with that. I think that was like the provocation with which I accessed what I made, what that means to, like really hone into this thing, this constantly shifting thing, and say like, this is me, I hold it. It doesn't have to be anything outside of me, it's here with me, and I get to like regularly reshape it. And in the face of things that perhaps feel uprooting or dysregulating or unsure, that I find it here, and what does that look like? And what does it look like to have it with like hope in knowing that these other things are also constantly in movement. So when Kat approached me, it was originally with a previously made, which was more. At the time, I guess I felt more anxious, and then I thought, I'd like to make something for this that perhaps is like almost 2 years on, where am I? And then that's sort of what I made. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I also love the idea of, if y'all like your work enough, like taking it home and putting it up. Like, I feel like that'd be such a boss move to make. And also,
My house has a lot of photos of me in it. Nicely framed.
Love it.
Right next to my bed. It's great.
Love it. Self-love. We love a healthy ego. And something I was thinking about in preparing for this talk and even trying to invite people is I kept saying, yeah, I'm leading this talk called Imagining Home. It's not. It's called Imaging Home. And the fact that my brain keeps replacing it makes me think that clearly it's important to me. So I was wondering, how important was imagination in your process to make or present the things that you have shown in the exhibit?
I think I can start. I think imagining myself as my mother, right? I think there's so much history there that is fraught, and my mother's been dealing with addiction since before I was born. Well, she would like to debate that, actually, because then that means that, but anyway, after, maybe right after. But I think, but for a long time, and trying to put myself in her shoes constantly and thinking about, who was this person before my siblings and I were here? And why is she struggling? And she was struggling before we were here. The struggle is still happening. And why don't we sometimes see our parents as human? It's like as soon as they had children, they become this robot. I'm like, no, they had feelings and emotions and issues that they didn't deal with before we got here. So me just swapping, like just doing a simple face swap, I sent it to her. She was like, OMG, like this is just texting through art with her and using that means to have a dialogue. And then all of a sudden she started telling me her story when she was 16, and that's how old I was in that photo. So trying to just see myself in her shoes, literally and also figuratively, is where I think imagination came in.
I love hearing that because, like, I have another photo, a part of my Dion series. It's literally titled "I Look Like My Mother," self-portrait 1980s, right? And oftentimes, with the work that I have, I'm always imagining a world in which a fat Black femme queer body can exist in their entirety, right? Which I also find is interesting that it was like through this alter ego is when I felt comfortable enough to be at home in my body to then take technically a nude photo, especially considering the fact that at the time I was in Senegal, in which like Senegal is an extremely conservative country, and like homosexuality is punishable to 12 to 15 years in prison. And here go my gay ass taking a naked photo in my room, and like I really had to like use my imagination to like gauge how I made the work, because I was like, I want to make work as Dion in this nice pool, and I was like, I can't do that, you know. So like, what are ways that I can like honestly world build in the confines of like the apartment that they allowed me for a month. So like for me, imagining was that like how do I best depict or describe Dion? How do I best bring up the conversations of desire or self-worth through images with just me and a remote control and one flash, right? I'm like really questioning how I can do all of this stuff. Yeah.
Hello. Okay. Just making sure it's not. I think in terms of imagination, I was feeling a lot of like, how can I fantasy build something that is going to nourish my spirit? Because right now I'm kind of afraid. So a lot of what the footage I was using was just honestly me in like survival mode, just trying to, oh look, there's a deer in a cemetery, maybe it won't suck, life won't suck. Like, oh, this feels nice, oh, I'm doing something nice with somebody, and it's like, I just, trying to find a way to just be present in like the basic sense, and find the morsels of joy in there, and then how to blossom them out in a way that can, I don't know, that fantasy can, transmit in some kind of sense, and in that, way that, like, I can see through my own way the things outward and put them in myself, and then, reshape them into this new vision. Is like some kind of download at everyone else's brain, like, here, I don't know, this is how I'm coping, how you feeling about it, so that's like all of that is just compositing bits and pieces together, which is like always my impulse and my imagination. It's like kind of from here, but then it's coming from out, and I'm like piecing it all together and trying to, world build in that way.
For sure.
So for me, it really comes from, most recently it comes from this like family history, and my parents come from an indigenous town in Oaxaca in Mexico, and I don't know what they looked like when they were younger because they don't have any like photographs of themselves like from any time like younger than, I don't know, when they first came to the United States and got like a bureaucratic like passport photo taken. And so the topic of indigenous visual sovereignty has been a big drive in my work, because the work that I'm making now is kind of a collaborative way of helping them build an archive and like them being active image makers, and also kind of pushing back on this, like pointing your camera towards someone to take an image of them and then maybe allowing them to become image makers instead. So imagining home or imaging home kind of comes from that, that drive.
I love that. And I think as a journalist too, just the training that you get to be objective and to be like, oh, somebody is in a newsworthy place, so of course they want their picture taken or whatever, without consent. I think we're getting a little closer, I would hope, to having like consensual media representations. And I'm curious specifically for you, Lorena and Tyanna, how you all go about, this is gonna sound so basic, how do you go about collaborating with your parents? Because I think I've had the hesitation where it's like, I can tell my business and I know what I know, but I don't want to cross a line and say something out of line or be inaccurate or make up a fake photo of my young parents, like whatever it would be. So did you sit down and say, I can't make this piece without them, and have like a strategy, or did you fall into the collaboration, and was it an easeful process?
I definitely not an easy process. I will say, speaking of like an investigative journalist, I do think there's a part of an artist that is that, when you're tapping into other people's stories and trying to making sure you're not being exploitive, disrespectful, but also my family story is my story. And my mother actually had to tell my siblings that, because they were like, well, are you just using our photos? And I was like, well, I'm using all of our photos. They're like, And I was like, okay, well, I promise you, let me take you to my website, let me show you. And once I started inviting my family to show, well, I always invited them, but when they started to actually come to shows, they were like, oh, okay. They were just like the fear. And I was like, well, let me talk to them first. Let me ask people, can I use their photos before I use them? But I do think the caveat is using them in a way that they don't know I'm using them. So like, I think that's where the reface comes in, and just kind of playing around with me and them. But I have always, at least discuss things with my family members and said, this is what I'm doing. And I will say they've all, at various different points, just gave me permission and said, we just didn't know, we don't know what art is. That's not our background. You studied it, that's great for you, but all we see is that we went through some stuff, and then you are having an artist talk, and they think I'm gonna say something that hurts them, right? Like, I promise you that's not, but I do have to navigate that very carefully. And I do not talk about everything in my family. I do not make work about everything in my family. Some things are just off limits. It's still hurtful, it's painful, and it's not my story to tell. But if it involves me in any way, and it bothered me, or it still bothers me, I'm like, I gotta talk about it. And my mother literally said, that's your right. I'm glad you have an outlet. I wish everybody had the same outlet as you, but unfortunately they don't. So you should take that with a badge of honor. And I like the story of my uncle being my uncle was in prison, and when my other uncle died in prison, I immediately made work of my uncle to give him a space outside of prison. And my mother took photos of the show, sent it to my other uncle, his brother in prison, and he wrote me a long letter thanking me for giving his brother a space outside of the prison system. And I was like, now that, I didn't expect that. So I didn't expect my family to actually care. So when I post stuff, and then my cousins, who I'm not that close to, repost images of them that I took, they're like, ooh, they're like excited. So I was like, okay, that's a nice surprise. But I wasn't doing it for the glory of just, let me expose my family drama. It's like, no, I have to talk about what happened with me.
Yeah, I think I come at it from the same sense of what you just said, of like, I have to say, what I experienced. And I think like the work that that I first made that print from 2016 of the Social Security cards and my dad against the background. That was the first time I actually really included like my family story into my art. I had been making other work before that. And it was the first time I included them, but also the first time I kind of felt like some resonance from my own work. And so I think over the last 4 or 5 years, it's just been gradually changing the way that they're included in the work. And it is really just, it is about storytelling, and I've changed how much I want to say and how much I don't want to say. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it also maybe comes with like artistic development too. Like when you're young and you just want to be seen and you just want everything to be pretty, that's one thing, but it's another to be like, wait, I have to be intentional. This might follow me somewhere. So that totally makes sense. Another thing that I noticed, just thinking about each of your work, is that everybody grew up in different places, but I would say that each of the pieces feel really warm and homey to some extent, which makes me assume that there are commonalities in every home, whether or not that's true. And I wonder if you all extracted from a specific home space to make this, or if it resembles like a childhood or something like that, like a childhood home or a bedroom to like go off of, or is this completely a myth on canvas?
So for me, growing up, so we didn't grow up with cable. We had an extensive DVD collection though, right? So oftentimes early, late 90s, early 2000s, Black rom-coms are heavily influential in my work.
Okay.
Right? So like with the image that I have up, Breaking Out the House, Breaking All the Rules was the reference, right? And granted, a lot of these movies came out, I had no right to be watching these films that were very like centered in like adult themes, right? About like love and sex and adultery and like how to be a player in 10 days and stuff like this. But that was a part of my home. That was a part of like, oh, if you're gonna be sitting in this house instead of going outside playing with the kids, you're gonna sit here with me while watching my movie and like paying these bills, right? So that has a lot to do with it. But then also, my mother has always been on my head about keeping my bedroom clean, right? She still gets on me when she comes to visit or like whatever. You need to clean this damn room. So there was something about the cleanliness of the room in the photo. Like the fact that like the room was completely white.
Truly.
Like the sheets, the bed, the duvet cover, the duvet, the pillow, the mosquito net over the bed. Everything was like pristine and white. And I was like, okay, this is like, I was like, everything just kind of aligned with the making of the work. I like, honestly, like, I'm always thinking about like my mother or like the Black femmes and women. Like there's some photos I've even thought about you in, right? Because like you are also a part of my circle. So I'm always thinking about like how y'all provide a home space, right? We're making this work. So it was like, oh, like how would they, like if they wanted to be seen in this way, like what would my best friend Desiree pose as? Like how would she arch her back? Like in what way would Taylor swing her wig? In what way would Imani tilt her head? Like I think about all of that when doing that, because home is not always, the interior domestic space, but like the community that you are held in or a part of.
Well, that's why it's warm. That's why.
Because it's like as much as people don't realize that my work is honestly still collaborative, whether or not y'all are actually making it with me or not, it's still collaborative because it's so heavily influenced and inspired by community.
Love that. Thank you.
I would say mine was a literal and figurative because I think when we met Kat, I remember I was like, oh yeah, I should probably figure out what I'm doing for this piece. And so I was and I'm in my apartment in Detroit. It's an old building. It's on Brush and Hendry. It's the only apartment building in that area, and it's the building was built in like 20. So it's an old building. So it has this original wood. I'm obsessed with original wood and crown molding and all that stuff. And the problem is it has the original windows. I need to fix them. But my view, so my living room is, and it's a studio apartment, so it's not huge, and it's a bay window. I also love bay windows. I don't know, something about them. And I just got up and I just took a picture because I love that view. Out of the window is the neighbor's house. And that's my view, that I'm always looking at. The TV's right there, and then those are the windows. So I can see the sunset, I see all of that, and I'm like, that's one of my favorite parts about that apartment. And so I took a picture of that, and then I also was like, I like this cheesy crown molding, that's gonna go in there too. But also the plants that I have in that piece, my mother gave me that plant over 10 years ago. And she had the plant for 10 years. And I have just been holding on to this plant. And I call it the hood plant, I do. I call it the ghetto plant. I'm like, this thing thrives. I don't know, I forget. But I think it thrives no matter what. It's died 100 times, came back. Like if I leave it for a month, I come back and it's like, as soon as I show up, it just pops up. I'm like, that's what's up. And so I even have a plant sitter, and she's like, this plant is something else. And it changes every year, directions. And so I threw that in there because I'm like, this plant is my mother gave it to me. I still have it. It's 20 years old at this point, and it's holding on. So with her image right next to the plant that she gave me. So, and also the view that I look at every day in my Detroit space.
And the name of the piece is crown molding, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
Which
got it.
also the fro, the hair, the little spritzer that you use for plants, specifically air plants. And I was like, I think about plants and hair, specifically black hair, and the labor, and also when the plants start to grow and it gets all curly and all the twines get intertwined, I think about how much it takes to like take down my hair and redo it and retwist it. And so I've always in my head attributed plants to hair and growth and crown. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that was, we've been going and going. I was saying, did you extract from an actual home space to make your piece?
Yes. I think it's quite literally like, besides like the print with the Social Security cards, it is very directly like me actually just observing like my parents' home and appreciating it. And also the photo or the print of like the mill and the garlic, like that's just kind of me. It's taken like I'm on FaceTime with my parents, and when they're walking around their home, I'm just taking photos of their space, and then I'm printing it myself. So it is actually just really directly home, and like we never had like any sense of like interior design or anything like that. So it's kind of just like me appreciating it for what it is, and like I think it's beautiful. So that's why I do really directly work with home.
Yeah, that's so sweet. And Renee, I know yours is a little different because I feel like we see so many different places and images in your collage, but does that apply to you at all?
Yes. It's interesting. I just really love hearing what everyone's saying. It's so, I don't know, it's really illuminating. But also when you were mentioning childhood, I was thinking about that because I grew up watching so many B horror movies like on VHS with my friend, and her mom would be like, "Don't tell your dad how they watch this," and I think that the textures that I work with, which are like kind of these in between analog digital devices, it's like sort of that comfort in that way. There's something soothing, comforting me about the materiality of the objects I use, like home building in that way. There's that comforting aspect, and also like because I was very introverted and still am, but especially as a child, I was very much a loner. I didn't really talk to anybody. I read a lot of books. I watched a lot of stuff. So this sort of, and I think we have that even more so now, is like through these screens, we're kind of seeing each other or interacting with each other. So for my own sense of like dissociating, trying to disrupt the screens to have like a fragility, a warmth. And I like that you said warmth, because that was important to me, to access warmth in that material, the humanity within it, like not make it just like there's something, like it's alive in a way. And it's like that I'm like kind of communing with it, with the things I'm capturing, with the way I'm layering with it, that part of me is going inside of it, along with like things around me. So that, Yeah, that literally that home was in transit with me, and home was being shaped around me, and I'm just trying to like build that, you know, in community as well. Like the things they are my home.
Mm-hmm.
My home is here, but my home is with like every little moment of like softness and safety and tenderness that from anything around me. Like yes, that's home, and it gets to change all the time. You know, it's not a static entity.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think something else that was kind of funny is that I was able to see the exhibit with Catherine. She walked me through, had notes, had every answer to probably all these questions and more. So nobody else was there, and I was able to really sit with it. But a part of me still felt like there were moments where I was supposed to look away. Like, even though this is on a wall, and even though this is an exhibit at Cranbrook, there were corners or just something where I'm like, am I supposed to be seeing this right now? Am I allowed to look at it? So I wonder if you all were thinking about what was just outside of the frame in any of what you were making, because as a viewer, I kind of wish, there were moments where I wish I could peek around the corner, and other moments where I'm like, oh, I'm not supposed to go in there. So I wonder if that influenced the way you made your work at all.
Oh, I wanted y'all to be voyeurs.
Okay.
Like I thought about the bed as a stage, right? I thought of like the camera was a mirror. I'm like, and it's so funny because one of the museum staff, when I came after the show opened, they were talking to me. They was like, I feel like I'm not supposed to look at the photo, and I was like, baby, go ahead and look, right? But they were just like, I don't know if I should look. I feel like I'm a bit intrusive. And like, I guess when I was making, I was like, oh yeah, I want whoever looks at this to feel like a spectator, like feel like a bit of a voyeur. But I guess I didn't click that some people would feel like, oh, like I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Like, and I kind of enjoy that. I kind of enjoy the fact that it kind of makes people like, oh, I'm sorry, like. For an example, like when you walk into somebody's bedroom, they're getting dressed, and they're like, wait, and you're like, oh, my bad. That's the feeling that some people get when they see the images, and I think it's even more interesting because I had not seen the photos before. I had not seen the photos printed and framed before they got here. Like
Wow.
I printed, framed, left them in a box, and they came to pick them up. They were gone. So seeing them in the size that they are, to me, just intensifies that feeling, right? Because now it feels almost. It's almost the size of like the lower half of a window pane, right?
Right.
So it's almost as if you're looking through someone's window, and like the sheerness of the netting, right? And like the way I drape the netting, so you can kind of see like I'm kind of opening up. Yeah, I don't know. I like that. Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that you thought about it as an intimate space, and of course it is. It's literally my living room, minus maybe no, there's 3 windows. But I'm someone who also believes in blinds and curtains, and I don't care if I was in the middle of nowhere. I'm closing the window. I'm just closing the shade. And I had a friend who's like, "Why the curtains?" I'm like, "What? Why not?" She's like, "Do you think so?" I'm like, "Probably. I don't know, but I don't want to think about it." So I do think about blinds, the idea of blinds in general. You're like, I'm looking at something I shouldn't be, but I also find myself like, if the neighbor's got some stuff going down, I'm looking. Also wait.
Oh, we really the same person.
But then
I'm nosy.
but then I'm a hypocrite because on my end I have all this stuff to protect me from. Because somebody said if you can see them, they can see you. I'm like, you ain't seeing me. I'm gonna find a way. I'll close the lights off and look at. But anyway, so I even put the like vinyl stuff on the window. I went to extremes to make sure that you know I seeing what's going on over here. But I'm gonna be all up in your business. But I also like people in my personal space. Of course, when you want them in your personal space. I'm glad that you're like, I looked at that and was like, I shouldn't be. What else is going on? Because I think that's. I think the beauties of being in a small space and having lots of windows that you can like look out constantly. So I'm always in my window. I'm that person. Yeah.
Did it apply to anybody else's work, the outside of the frame view?
Yeah, I actually, the aspects of how I edited it, I wanted to show the parts where I there's a vulnerability too, where my head's literally being shaved in the video, and I'd never shaved my head before, and my friend who's here helped me do that. So it's literally like, I am so vulnerable right now, but also like I am showing you the process of me doing it. There's parts where you can see like the keyboard and stuff. There's parts where it looks like, is this like meant to look this way? It looks broken, or am I supposed to be seeing this part of it? And again, it's like about disrupting this kind of screen static, perfect looking thing that we're just used to seeing a certain way, and like showing that, there's a human here, and it's like touching it, and there's like, maybe it is vulnerable, maybe it is not gonna, it's decaying, it's maybe like not, it doesn't have to be this like thing. Like I wanted it to feel intimate. Mm-hmm. I wanted to like make a thing that is like kind of innately cold, like feel human and alive, and like maybe it holds parts of us in a way we were transmitting. I often feel like when I'm using the devices and when I'm layering this stuff, I'm like literally like talking to it, like it's alive, because it feels like it is to me. I know that sounds strange, but it does feel alive to me. Yeah. And that intimacy, is something that, maybe I do want people to like engage with.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like you kind of had to talk to yours specifically because you were writing words, because there's an accompanying poem, so you have to. Something else I really enjoyed I don't like to compare different pieces of art, but in looking at everyone's beautiful pieces, it was really cool to see that you all use different techniques and technologies. Like everybody did something completely different, and I'm wondering how you chose how to bring something to life. Like if you knew you were going to do a video audio collage, if you knew it would be a portrait, if you knew it would be like printing and layering and transferring images, was that the idea from jump, or did that change in the making of your pieces at all?
I can start because definitely I think the pandemic, I'm a traditional printmaker, screen printer, so having to use a space specifically for what you need, like if I was a traditional painter, I wouldn't, of course I can do that anywhere, but printmaking is very particular to a space, a time, and things you need. So when the pandemic happened, if my students weren't able to use the shop, I was like, well, I'm not gonna use the shop. I gotta lead by example. So I was like, listen, you can do this anywhere. We're gonna do this at home. And we did. So,
better than me, because I would have been using that damn shop.
No, you was hitting me up like, can I get
I
up in
sure
there?
was. Like, can I use the studio? I know your studio's not there.
I was like, okay. So pivoting is my favorite thing. So more than anything, I'm an image maker, right? And I feel like there's so many ways you can make an image. It does not have to be a traditional print. It can be video. It can be even capturing voice, thinking of that thing. So I think over the pandemic, for me, the thing that shifted was my love of digital work, and the Epson printer became my best friend. And I actually, 2 years not being in the studio in that way, I did not have any energy to go into the studio and produce the same way I did. I didn't realize I needed a break from the labor of working in print. And then for this show, I was like, I actually miss working in that labor. So what if I mix the two? So some of the work is actual digital, printed out of an Epson printer, and then screen printed, maybe with a little bit of ink to pop it out. But and then the other things are hand printed. So I had to negotiate what is going to be hand printed and what's going to be digital. So I knew that the plants and the image of my mother had to be me putting my all in it, and the other things could have a separation of church and state. So but that came out of the pandemic. So that piece literally was birthed out of me changing my perspective and pivoting my practice.
Yeah, and I'm just curious specifically about the picture of your mother. Are you also in that image? Like, are your faces laid on each other? What is that process?
So the deep fakes or the face swap or reface, it literally will take their features, blend them, or swap your face completely. So you're in there, but they're maybe a little bit a part of it. But I think because it's my mother, it blended more. If it was a stranger, it'd have just been my face.
Right.
Their face is gone.
Gotcha.
But I think with hers, I was like, wow, our lips are the same, our high cheekbones, let's go. All right. I didn't quite have a fro like she did, but because that was taken in the early 70s. And she was like, I was in my, moving 18, 19, and I'm taking it as me now at 38. So I went some years back. But that was that was the one that I couldn't tell the difference if it swapped my face out completely. Yeah.
That's beautiful. reiterate the question.
Thank
The question was, basically, how did you choose which method or like which medium you would use to bring this to life, and if it changed at all in the process of you making it?
Oh, okay. So my funny fact is the photo that I have in the show has been in my mind since 2017 when I graduated from grad school.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, okay. Whenever I get the chance, like I got to the point I was actually going to rent a room at Shinola just to take the photo until I saw the price. I was like, I don't have $600 for one night, so they can kiss my ass. But for me, it was like I kept trying to figure out ways of getting it out. Like I was writing
Right.
about like these ideas, and I was okay, the writings sound good, but this is not fulfilling what I want. And honestly, like, I did not know the photo was gonna get taken when I got to Senegal until I saw that bed of room. I was like, it's the photo! Like it literally was just almost like the light, like not came on, but it exploded. Cause I was like, oh, it's like the access is here. I have what I need, and only thing I had to do was go to a different continent. But yeah, like I guess like for me it was like the thought was always there. I had taken like really horrible digital sketches on my old iPhone. Actually, it was an Android phone. This is before I had the money to buy an iPhone. And I had the photo in my computer, and I wrote over it, like physically like printed it and would write over it. And was like, oh, maybe this could be the thing in which like the object could be like just this text over a really bad photo.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, this ain't it. It just didn't feel fulfilling. So of course, as someone who is like trained in photography, someone who like studies and eats, breathes, shits photography, I like resorted back to like what I do best, which is like portrait photography. Which is also interesting because like my light had stopped working when I was in Senegal, so I photographed that with like the floor lamps they had in our rooms. Like I really had to like finesse and maneuver to get the image how I wanted it. But yeah, I guess like as a photographer, I'm always thinking about the image as image makers, right? Because when I think about all of us are using a lens to some extent to make our work. So yeah.
That's beautiful. I love when things work out.
The photo of the small mill and the garlic is kind of like a multi-step process, and so I already kind of explained that I'm on FaceTime and then I'm taking photos during that FaceTime call, and then I'm printing those with gum bichromate. And I chose gum bichromate because it's a process that uses the sun to expose a print, and I'm taking mostly pictures of the garden. So for me, there is this nice like correlation between the process of a garden flourishing and the process of making this photograph. And so that's kind of how I ended up at that process.
That's beautiful. It translates.
I didn't know I was making a poem. I knew I was going to make a video collage, but the poem sort of happened. It just sort of happens to me. I don't know. I felt this is one of those things that something happened. You felt like, and when I wrote that, I didn't know I was going to do something with it, but I kept thinking about it. And then I had this this title maker, so it's called the title maker, that you connect with my FX mixer and layer with, and that was just the perfect way to use it. So it's the first time I really was like compositing with text in that specific kind of way with these materials. So it just felt satisfying. Like you were saying, it felt satisfying to do this with it because I kept thinking about it, and I thought, clearly something this wants to come out and it wants to be heard. So I just embrace it, you know. But I think also feeling that prompt from Kat, like it was really like satisfying to then like roll with that too. Like this just feels like it's just coming in this moment. Like the poem came in that moment, and it was like, oh, clearly there's something I need to do with it. But yeah, Because originally I thought, oh, it's just a thing, and then it just felt like, oh, no, it's this thing. It's supposed to be here. And so, yeah, this is nice.
Yeah, and I liked every piece of it because I love being able to read along and also leaving with like just the poem on that hot pink paper. As soon as I saw the hot pink thing, I was just like, Catherine, can I take this? And she's like, you're supposed to. So I love the idea of like leaving a treat along with the work that you do. And I have I don't know, this question feels really big in my head, but maybe it's not in real life. But I think it's really important that each of you were selected to be in this exhibition and to show the work that you did show. But as an artist, I know that there is a difference between what people want to see from you versus what you want to show or what you care about or what you want to work on. So I'm curious if you all are entering a new era in your art, or if there's a new technique that you're using or a new method, or just like, what I'm really trying to get to is if somebody saw you on the street and asked you about what you're working on or what's next, what would be the answer for them, or like what would you want to talk about? Because I think we can end up in conversations like this all day, and it's also like, but I'm an artist and I'm actively working on new things. So if you all could like peel back the blinds a little more, since we're all voyeurs anyway, and tell me about what's changing in your art right now and how, and maybe how the people in this room can help you or look at it.
We don't have enough time to talk about that.
A bite-sized answer, a morsel.
It's my practice is like forever in flux. While I'm still working under my alter ego of Dion, right? But now Dion is exploring like performance. Dion is exploring video. Mm-hmm. I sometimes DJ as Dion. You will see it later on this month if y'all come out. Full beats, I'm ready.
Love it.
But then like outside of that, I've like taken on the idea of world building, right? So like portals, landscape, thinking about like this, the history of site-specific locations as it relates to Blackness. Even through that, now I'm like, I've realized recently with the help of like my mentee that I enjoy photographing movement, like physical movement. Like this is what I do. This is something that like, something about it always feels a bit haunting. It also draws you in. I'm thinking about sound in different ways beyond just DJing. So like, how can I tell a story with abstract sounds? How can I build a world just sonically, right? I'm writing more abstractly about a lot of these ideas. So like my practice has like, I do not see it slowing down. I actually see myself getting tired tomorrow, but it's like the work is consistently growing. Yeah, if anybody wants to do a studio visit, hit me up.
I think that's a really hard question. So it is harder than you, like you said.
Okay, good.
I'm like, I think that for me, the work pivoted, of course, through just giving myself permission to think outside of what I typically have done. I think a lot of times artists just have to give themselves permission because there's always this critic. It could be like a voice from grad school or a non-academic voice that's saying like, that ain't it. And you're like, is it though? And if I like it, I think my goal is that if I like it, then that's it. I don't care. Mm-hmm. So I've had to learn to embrace my aesthetic and not too much concern myself with what everybody else is going to think or say about it. I've seen a lot of artists lose their way because of that. And I'm like, that sucks. If other people are getting in your head that much that you just don't feel it's worth it. So like, it has to be worth it for me. And I also have to keep my eyes open, right? I have to keep the eagerness in me to see something and go, I really like it. But as far as like, I never think that far ahead. I'm in a break mode. I'm summertime, I'm just chilling. So I think for the fall, though, I never really know what's next until I get in the studio and start working. And I'm a different type. I'm not I say this to my friend, I say there's dedicated studio artists and then there's research-based artists. And I find myself a research-based artist where I have to watch, like the Kardashians' new episode came out.
Very important material.
I'm excited. That's important. I also think like downtime is important to my practice. I have to cut off and not just obsess over art and what I'm going to do next. I'm like, I just have to live and be and deal with family members that's dealing with incarceration and issues, like real stuff. That to me is like the meat of the work that's going to happen later, but I don't get too consumed with it because I'm like, it just wouldn't be fun anymore. But I do love that question. I will meditate about that.
Please let me know. Just hit me up when you're ready.
I identify with what both of them are saying. My friend Billy Mark, who's an artist in Detroit, he said something that I think about all the time. Because I always have the, I don't know, I think a lot of us makers maybe have that weird conversation where we're talking about, oh, are you working on anything? And there's this thing like, oh, we feel like we have to be working on something, or, and I remember I was kind of talking with Billy, and he's like, I've been just really into, like, just not really moving, like, so fast, but, like, moving deeper. And I remember the way he said that, and it was like I felt myself sigh. I was like, jeez Louise. Like, because I think also the past couple years of pandemic is this slowing down, and that I felt like energetically, spiritually, physically, like I needed to slow down. I just needed to slow down. I needed to not worry about, like, producing, period. And then I just don't want to worry in that way, that's not how I navigate making, that I need to enjoy the process. It needs to be joyful for me. I need to feel nourished by it. I don't need to prove anything. I'm not interested in proving anything to anybody. I'm working through something, and if it needs to be doing that for me. And yeah, it's going to be all over the place because I'm a bit of an octopus. So in that way, just like setting that free, and in collaborating or in making different ways that I'm going to enjoy it, and rest, that I'm going to rest. I'm not going to force something to happen because I've got to do it, because if I don't, I just don't. I'm not interested in suffering. I just am not interested. Thank you. I think it's really important that there's joy in making, and everyone's process is different, and it's not to say that this is valid or that's not, but for me, like for my mental well-being, I need to be able to find joy and playfulness and silliness and experimentation. I intentionally craft my work for experimentation and just sort of improvising. When I do my visual work, I actually I can't replicate the images twice. It will always, it's because it's in response to the environment constantly. But that fragility is part of what is satisfying to me. That I relinquish control a bit and let it be here with me. That's how I make it alive to myself. And I cherish that. It's important to me,
That's so good.
Yeah.
I am continuing to work on the gum by chromate prints. It's a very difficult process, and I've had a lot of frustrating studio times, but I think just this collaborative work with my parents is really important to me, and continuing to research into the concept of visual sovereignty, indigenous visual sovereignty is really important to me, and I try to make sure to give myself breaks because it is pretty miserable sometimes in the studio. Yeah,
and indigenous visual sovereignty sounds cool. It sounds like a band. So
I like that.
And you can make it one.
I'm already on the mic, so.
Yeah.
Welcome to the stage.
Could you tell me what that looks like for you? Just because I feel like I know what it is, but I wonder, in your body and in your work, what does that look like?
For me, it looks like my parents making images rather than me making images of them. And maybe, I guess, encouraging that responsible image making for other people. I've become almost uncomfortable having a camera in my hand and pointing it at people, especially my parents. And so, it's not to say that you can't do it, but it's just to say, think closely about how you're using the camera and how you're using images. So I think that's a big part of where my practice is also going.
Yeah, I love that. And I just have one more question, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A portion. But I was really excited when Catherine told me who all the artists were, because I'm like, there are no straight men on this panel. And that's really important to me sometimes. So I really was just...
And there shouldn't be.
And there isn't. And I was really just thinking about the phrase, though, like head of household, and how when we think about it, we think about like this big old scruffy man with like, I know, right? It doesn't happen in real life, but you think of like a big sweaty working man coming home providing for his family, when it's like, every head of household I know has like a curly fro and like a high ponytail, but okay. But what I was trying to get to is I think it's really important that we build home spaces that appear to be outside of the male gaze, which is not necessarily expected in the society that we live in. So I wonder if you all were thinking about that at all in your work, if you were catering to a certain gaze or escaping a certain gaze, even within a home space.
Okay, so realistically, because I'm talking about desire for a fat black queer femme body, I feel like the idea of a male gaze is always there, because I'm like, oh, well, who do I want to be desired by? Oftentimes the answer is not these motherfuckers. Oftentimes the answer is myself.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, but I'm not gonna hold you up, sometimes it is like, oh, I want to be touched.
Yeah.
You know? But I also just want to laugh a bit, because like, whenever I think of home, and like, granted, my father was in my life. Like, I grew up with my father. He didn't run nothing. Like, my mama would be like, come home at this time, bring me my money. You know, like, it was always, I've always been surrounded by very, very, just like demanding women, right? Even like outside of my home, but just in the community. It's always been, like, women make the world go round, and like in my perspective, and the way I've experienced life, especially in Detroit, right? But yeah, I will say, unfortunately, sometimes some of my work does cater to a male gaze, because I am very queer and very single, so so that, you know, it plays a major part, right? Like, even in casual conversations when talking about the work, or when talking about desire, I'm still talking about like the yearning to be touched, the yearning to build a home with somebody. Like, I'm queer.
Yeah.
Like, this is something that oftentimes a lot of queer bodies do not get the chance to experience because of shame or societal standards or things of that nature. But yeah, unfortunately, my work most times do cater to a male gaze. Sorry about it.
I like that. I was gonna say, I never considered that, I guess. I don't, it doesn't work in the context of, I think, what I'm working on. But I will say, other people have pointed out to me that a lot of my work is, there's a lot of women in my work, and I didn't even notice it. But I was like, well, that makes sense. Every household that I grew up in, the woman was in charge, and there was an absence of a male father figure. And then as I continue to grow, even like the foster homes I went in, actually, now I think about it, there was one home in particular where there was a man, and that's my foster father to this day, who we're close to. And he's a pastor. That was the first like male figure I had in my life who had to be a pastor. That was another one. So I was also a pre-K for a minute. So, but I never considered that until someone brought it up. And I like that. I was like, that doesn't fit in my construct. But there is an absence of my father. He was never, my paternal father was never there. And I often think about the fact that so for some reason I don't care. I don't know what it is. Maybe I had what I needed in all the other people, that I don't think about. I have to force myself to think about the fact that I met my father once when I was 6. And I'm like, does that bother me? And I really be trying. I'm like, I don't think so. So I don't know why. And I'm like, but thank you for bringing that up.
For sure.
Yeah, I actively was thinking about male gaze when I made this. I mean, even the title, I can't carve myself. I can't carve myself out of me. because I was just, you know, thinking about like just projections of what you know, particularly male gaze wants me to be, and how this is it right here. This is it. I need every last ounce. I need all of me the way that I am, and this is it, and this is my home, and you can either like be in this journey and share that with me, or you can like, sorry, but get the fuck out of the way.
Yeah.
And that is like what I was feeling, and even I was thinking about the story Frankenstein, you know, which was written by Mary Shelley. You know, it's like the most iconic horror story of all time, and it's a woman who went through a loss and thought about reanimating her, you know, the undead of her, you know, unborn child, but also the undead of like an abusive alcoholic husband, you know, who just treated her horribly. And I thought about, that's where I was thinking about like what makes us monstrous is our need for love when we are deprived of it. And like that somehow that needing that is a weakness, that tenderness is a weakness, the softness is a weakness, that wanting to be and cherish that like femme personality and characteristics are a weakness, and like how I'm just so fed up with that narrative. Like this is a power, my softness is a strength, my love is a strength to be cherished, and like I will not carve that out of me. I refuse to reign in my tenderness, you know, like I'll reign in it. It is like my like queenship, it is my rule. My ruling is here in this land, and like take it, deal with it, you know? And so like that was my confronting of that, you know, like for me at the time, but also in like, yeah, wanting to feel desire, but like in desiring, like you're saying, in desiring myself, like desiring this self and this growth within me that is, you know, to me is beautiful in its own unique way. And like relishing that, savoring that, and that is like only going to nurture the love that I deserve from anything around me, you know, myself and others, and just, you know, whatever's out there. So yeah, thanks for asking that question. And I wasn't, when you asked me, I'm like, oh wait, that was like, even subconsciously was just kind of at the forefront of what I was, you know, investigating. So yeah.
Beautiful. Does that apply to you or not for real?
I don't think it applies to me.
Okay.
I'm sure I could think of something, but I don't think.
We're not forcing it. That's the theme of this whole thing. We're not forcing anything. Well, thank you all so much for asking my nitty-gritty questions. And I think the audience now gets to do their own knit and grit. And I believe, we'll be passing the mic around to ask questions.
Thank you. Beautiful work, fabulous talk. I'm really happy that you guys are all here. I'm trying to figure out how to put this into a question. So thinking about how photographs often show up in a domestic space, they're usually capturing a person, a moment in time as documentation. As a lens-based artist, how do you navigate that relationship between the photograph as preservation and also imagination, where you're capturing and creating new things? I'm just curious to know how you all think of that.
I guess I talked too much. My mic died. So you said thinking about photos, the difference between like imagination and like documentation, or like the relationship. I don't know. I find it's interesting because earlier in my practice, very similar to you, I tried to make work using my family archives. My family refused to give me any of the photos. They've been trying to like take pictures on their really cheap ass Metro phones and send me pictures, but the quality's been bad, and I can't use this. But I guess for me, originally, I was always thinking about how through these archives I can build another world in which like things were better, or I can like change the narrative, or like share a narrative that isn't so heavily based in trauma. But unfortunately, I haven't been able to really explore this due to the fact that, again, very similar to what you were saying, how your family is like, what are you using these photos for? We don't trust it, because the crack epidemic hit my family like a pile of bricks, both on the receiving end and on the selling end. It hit my family like a bulldozer. So that made it a bit difficult to work with that material. I hope that answers your question, at least from me.
Yeah, thank you. I can totally. I would say, I guess, because of our, no one's been taking. When I say no one, I would say for the most part, our family has not taken a lot of new pictures unless they're taking them in their own individual pods of their families. But all of the photos from the past are actually positive ones. So the fact that I can go back, a lot of them were not upset about that. They were actually like, "Ooh, can you use this photo?" And I was getting people sending me stuff. Or I said, there's one family member that's always the gatekeeper of the photos, and that's my aunt. And I actually had to, coerce her into letting me borrow some, and then I had to give them right back, and I scanned them in. But she still has like thousands of photos from the 80s to the 90s, and she's the holder and the keeper. But she also didn't give them all to me. She picked and she chose which one she wanted me to have. And I actually liked that process because I was like, okay, all right, I'll use whatever you sent me. And but because of that, I'm not using any, I don't take current photos of anyone, right? I actually just use their objects. So I am also going around my mother's house taking photos of all of her stuff and archiving as much as I can in front of her, and actually having her tell me what's important to her and why, and then I'll document it, and then that will go into a piece, and then she's actually like excited. I've also learned the benefit of using or working with family if you're gonna talk about them, like bring them into the conversation, and then they feel this authority over the work too, which I think is also really helpful versus me just making a decision. And so for me, it's object and image. So there's the image that I'm going to archive and grab from found images, and then the object is a newly taken photo. So that's what you see in my piece to this day. It's like old photo thrown in with a little bit of new, but all the photos I took was recent.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about like the archive being this like jumping point, and I think it's the same for me. It's the same for me in the sense that like the image that you see of my father is an old image, maybe from like the 90s or something, but photos of them don't go much like further back. So I think this absence of an archive is where it kind of helps me spur imagination or creativity so that there can be an archive or creating an archive.
I think I just instinctually am making stuff knowing that I don't even see it as documenting. I know I'm manipulating the frame incessantly, because I also like obsessively think about John Berger's way of seeing. So I know I'm going to manipulate these frames into something, and that's like just in that relationship. I don't even know how to separate it now. It's just like just instinctual. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Hello. So I have a question about everyone's process, which is like, what is your process, or did you consider, or did you care to involve those intangible objects of home? Like I think about the smells, the air conditioning temperature, all of those things that you can't touch or see. And if that was considered, like what was your process like bringing that into the work so that the viewer, while they can't smell the photograph or necessarily feel the air, can kind of have that same feeling you do?
I like that question. I guess for me, I'm always thinking about what can I bring that is, what can I exaggerate for you? For me, it's exaggerated. It's a big deal for me. I'm like, oh, I like this plant. How do I care? How do I get other people to care? I care. And I think scale is always one trick to get people to think something's important, right? I just go big and people think it's, it was so much work. And I'm like, it was, but for me, the objects are larger than life. They're not realistic to the size. So I think scale plays a part, but also just picking, I forgot the first part of your question. Already. Just saying what our process is and how we're getting people to. So I think for me it's just putting things on a pedestal. If there's, you notice I also put a shelf, and I think the shelf is an actual literal way of saying this is important. So I'm messing with my own psyche, right, by saying this is important, but how do I show it literally, but also figuratively? And I think, and hopefully that can come across to the audience.
Yeah, I feel that my piece is a very like insular world, an interior world, and like how I'm like trying to show that. But there's also these intimate like spaces inside my house. Like there's these series of kittens. I was like fostering like 3 kittens at some point. I kept finding them and then finding them homes, and I was like putting them in kitten burritos, and that I wanted to like share that kind of strange little world I had. And like trying to evoke like a feeling. I also was spending a lot of time in a prairie and in cemeteries, so I was like going to those, which are interior spaces, but they're spaces that were like, have all this sort of felt energy for me, and like that, that's like, again, I'm like trying to transmit that sense of like comfort to someone, to like, oh, like, well, I don't know, like, here is this, and so, and like kind of again like trying to create this like sort of fragility and brokenness in the frames, like that there's just like a softness there, and a maybe like that there's like a presence there with you, that you can like that you're there with it, and it feels you, and that it's like inviting you in to experience it.
I'm gonna try to answer it to the best of my ability. As far as the process itself, it was, as I said before, it was in my head in 2017. Took me, until 2021 to finally make the photo. So the writing had been there, the context to the movie had been there, the research had been there, the all of that had been there, right? When I think about like different elements and what like that I did the day of taking the photo, again, I was in Senegal, so it was hot as hell. The AC was not on full blast, because that AC worked like Mr. Frost, and I would freeze. But I'm someone who always traveled with incense, so I had incense burning in the room. Even though the air conditioner was on, I was like, I ain't paying this bill, so I'm gonna crack a window so I can hear the ocean. So like, because like the residency is right off the shore, so you could hear the ocean. My body was lathered in shea butter, because like, if I'm in Africa, I'm gonna give me some real shea butter, right? So like, these are components that, I guess part of the process of me making an image, right? It's like the act of adorning myself before I perform in front of a camera, which is something I find myself doing often before, especially when doing work as Dion. I try to always adorn Dion to some extent. So whether it's like, I'm gonna spend an hour in makeup, I'm about to like, tease this wig out the night before, put it on my mannequin in my bedroom and look at it. Whether it's like, I'm putting on a certain playlist. I have 3 playlists on my Spotify/Apple that are specifically for Dion, depending on the mood. One of them is literally called I'm Up the Fuck, and it's just like all Black women rappers, like cocky, talking their shit, and like this is the type of music I play when preparing for Dion's. Like, all of these things go into the making process of the work.
As far as my process, I haven't mentioned that I also do video work, and so there's a video that accompanies this current process that I have, where I screen recorded a FaceTime call with my mom where she like literally walked me through her garden. And this is like an early spring garden, so there's not a lot going on, but they're in California, so there's still green stuff coming out of the ground. But through the video, you get to kind of see the interaction between myself and my mom, and like our laughter and like the way that we interact with each other. So there's those aspects of home that maybe seem intangible that are still coming across, I think, through the video. So for me, it's nice to have kind of multidisciplinary aspects of my work.
Well, I guess that's it. Thank you all for joining us. I'm sure the exhibit is up for a while now, so if you haven't gone to see all their beautiful work or the rest of it that's featured, take time. I'm excited to come back and just spend time with it. But thank you all so much for spending a hot, sunny Thursday inside with us. That is very important. And I will pass it over to Catherine.
Hi again, everyone. Like Imani said, the show is open. We're open until 8 tonight, so please feel free to go out, take a look around the exhibition. I'll be around. I'm sure these guys will be hanging around for the next 30 minutes, and the show is open until Sunday, June 19th.